Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Jordan Hammerstad, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Vancouver, Canada. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the recent report out from the Josh Bersin Company, the definitive guide to corporate learning. I always love talking with folks from Josh Bersin Company about these various reports. They come out very frequently. And I think everyone in the audience knows the Josh Bersin Company and how important it is in terms of thought leadership, in terms of industry insights. And I've had, I don't know, probably at least a dozen interviews over the last few years with various individuals from the Josh Bersin Company, including Josh Bersin himself on a number of occasions. I don't think I've had a chance to talk with Jordan before, but I've had a chance to talk with several of Jordan's colleagues. So it's a first time with Jordan. Thank you so much, Jordan, for joining me. As we get started, I wanted to share Jordan's bio with everybody. Jordan Hammerstad is Associate Director of Research at the Josh Bersin Company, where she leads the L&D Roundtable, an executive forum driving corporate learning innovation. Passionate about the intersection of behavioral sciences and the workplace, she pursued a bachelor's degree in neuroscience before obtaining her master's in human resources. As a certified HR practitioner, Jordan brings experience from multiple industries, including commercial real estate, higher education, industrial automation, retail, and transportation. Her research focuses on learning and development, notably dynamic skilling, performance enablement, and AI-first corporate learning transformations. I love everything about that. So fun. And in fact, my whole entrance into the HR space was through learning and development and that L&D training and development and an organizational development kind of arm of HR. So I totally, I feel like we're probably kindred spirits. Great to be with you, Jordan. Anything that you would like to highlight by way of your own background or personal context before we dive on into this report?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate that comprehensive overview, and I do agree that I think we are kindred spirits. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about this report. Maybe you can set the stage for us. Again, there are all these different reports that come out from the Josh Bersin Company, really on the forefront of this of thought leadership in this space, and in these technical reports. Maybe just lay the foundation for us. Why did the Josh Bersin Company undertake this particular research at this point in time? Why is it so important?
Yeah, absolutely. We started this research, let's see, about 2 years ago because back then we saw a seed of change and we could see specifically in smaller organizations that AI wasn't just poised to accelerate the next wave of innovation in corporate learning, but it was starting to trigger a seismic shift. And that shift requires L&D teams to leapfrog not only in technology capabilities, but in their own mindset about what it is that they deliver to the organization. So what I'm speaking to is really this paradigm change from L&D owning learning for the organization to L&D enabling learning across the enterprise. And this ideal represents an emerging level of L&D excellence that we wanted to cover in this research, where learning becomes an always-on performance enablement engine, orchestrating learning skills, knowledge access, and capability building at the speed of work. And that at the speed of work piece is really critical because, as you know, L&D has been anchored in a static publishing model, not because that was the ideal state, but because that has historically been the only approach that was scalable.
Yeah.
But this model breaks down in today's era of dynamic work design where work is continuously reconfigured, roles are decomposed and recombined, teams are formed and reformed around priorities, and even tasks are moving between humans and artificial intelligence. So what we are seeing in the market is that good performance, what that looks like, is changing quarter by quarter, week by week, day by day. And in this environment, highly relevant, personalized learning experiences need to be accessible inside the workflows themselves, not just upstream or downstream of the workflows separate from work. It needs to be incorporated into work. And I guess I'll add that we've seen a fair amount of progress over the last couple of years. We're starting to see larger organizations adopt this emerging level of L&D excellence that we call dynamic enablement. And so it's a very exciting time to be talking about this topic. And we've been exploring the L&D revolution for the past 2 years. As I mentioned, we had several publications last year. But what this particular piece of research does is center on how organizations are actually making the shift from traditional legacy learning and development to becoming an AI first L&D team.
Yeah, and that really does it completely changes the game, doesn't it? Like I
It
think
does
I think
entirely.
there'd been huge shifts already in the L&D space in recent years. Like when I just really think about the last decade, huge shifts in terms of the L&D space and how organizations were approaching learning and development and just-in-time learning and shifts from kind of the bigger chunks of learning and more traditional classroom-based learning to online learning and to micro learning and all those sorts of things, right? To now we have just-in-time learning and adaptable learning, to the needs of the individual person. And now enter AI, and all that makes all of that possible, like at scale, right? So now with AI, you truly can have this scalable just-in-time learning. You could have, a company of tens of thousands of employees where there's an AI tool that can analyze skills gaps and provide just-in-time opportunities for upskilling for any given individual in a range of modalities, right? Just like right then and there. Like, talk through that for us a little bit, and what your research found in terms of that.
Sure. I would say, and I've talked a lot about this with Josh Bersin. I can't count the number of times we've talked about this. AI as a milestone in the history of corporate learning is larger than the introduction of the LMS, larger than the impact of
Yeah.
the LXP. And that's because of the potential that it brings in terms of the impact that L&D can deliver to the business. So in our research very early on, we found out that 74% of organizations, so almost 3 in 4, aren't confident in their ability to build the skills that they need to execute their business strategy. And this is a metric that I routinely look at when I want to get a pulse on the impact potential of L&D globally. And when I speak to L&D leaders and they hear that 3 in 4 organizations are struggling to build the skills that they need, they're initially surprised and they want to talk further. But every single time as we look at the underlying factors, it becomes less and less surprising because in our research, we found out that less than 10% of companies have a defined process for identifying declining and rising skills in their industry. And then when we look at their own workforce, even fewer conduct skill gap analyses to look
Yeah.
at their current workforce capabilities and their own future needs. And we realize that the roadblock goes deeper than a lack of a skill priority analysis process. Really, the primary reason for the sizable capability and confidence gap in L&D is that traditional L&D platforms, content, operating models, they aren't built for today's speed of change. And so as AI is enabling things that we've always wanted to do before at a scale that we could never do before, it's creating a lot of differentiation in the market. So I see AI first L&D teams
Hmm.
having size potential to impact business metrics compared to even the best of traditional L&D teams. And all of this impact conversation is really interesting because we continue to see year over year that the annual spend in corporate learning globally is over $400 billion.
Hmm.
And even though that's increasing and it seems too big to fail almost, but in truth, the majority of this increasing investment sits in the legacy content platforms and operations,
Uh-huh.
which means that as reskilling is needed at an accelerated pace, the impact potential of traditional L&D is diminishing over time. So maybe some organizations are getting by today, but as work continues to be designed more and more dynamically, their impact potential will diminish if they're not looking at transforming their L&D operations. So when I talk about this confidence gap and the ability for L&D to deliver what it needs to deliver, I'm not talking about a lack of effort or a lack
Investment.
of
Yeah.
care. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's investment, there's a lot of effort and care poured into L&D, but the issue is that the traditional L&D approach is not converting learning investments into performance fast enough.
Yeah, yeah. So clearly the dollars are there, the investment is there, but it's not converting, right? It's not translating over into the skills that are needed for the performance that is needed into the gaps, right, that exist for organizations. But the technology is there to allow for that to happen. So that's kind of the irony.
Yes.
And I've heard Josh, I can't even remember how many times in various podcasts or speeches or, like keynotes or various things where he's talked. I can't remember how many times I've heard him talk about various skills, competencies, and capabilities, needed in the modern world of work and the future of work and all the gaps that exist in these organizations. And maybe talk to that a little bit, like what your research has found about how L&D has delivered in terms of skills to date and like where it's missing out and like where it needs to go.
Exactly. I love what you said that AI is really the source of the disruption, but it's also the pathway forward at the same time. So just as work is being redesigned across the business, it can also be redesigned in L&D. And the alternative to traditional L&D is actually quite exciting. It's striving for this emerging level of L&D excellence, which we call dynamic enablement.
Mm,
This level of maturity has only been reached by 5% of organizations today. The number is very few. But what differentiates these teams, these AI first L&D teams that can orchestrate dynamic enablement, is that they are leveraging AI to transform their L&D operations rather than optimize legacy workflows.
mm.
And because of that, they are dramatically more likely to deliver superior business, people, and innovation outcomes. And this is where I get really excited. Specifically, AI first L&D teams that are orchestrating dynamic enablement are 28 times more likely to empower employees to reach their full potential, which is critical if you want to develop a workforce of super workers, which I know you talked about with Julia Bersin a couple of months ago. You talked about super managers and super workers. To do that, you need to make employees feel empowered to reach their full potential. We also see that top L&D teams are 16 times more likely to adapt well to change, 7 times more likely to achieve high levels of productivity across all workforce segments, including frontline segments, and also 6 times more likely to exceed financial targets, which is the highest multiplier that we've seen across all of the HR domains that we've studied in our definitive guide series.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. So maybe talk a little bit more about this dynamic enablement, maybe
Yeah.
unpack that a little bit more, because I think that's a really important term. And like you said, only 5% of organizations right now. What are they doing differently?
Yeah, I love that question. I could talk about it all day, so I'll try to keep it brief. And I think the best way to summarize this is to look at the maturity model that we
Mm,
feature in this
hmm.
research. So we see that 76% of organizations are stalled at level 1 and level 2. And that's not surprising considering a similar amount of organizations are struggling to build the capabilities that they need. So at these lower levels, either learning is reactive or compliance focused, or at level 2, we see a culture of learning develop. There's a
Yeah.
broader learning portfolio, more learning modalities offered. But level 3, and the bar has been raised at this level compared to our previous studies of the corporate learning domain. We see level 3, which we call integrated development, as world-class traditional L&D operations. About 20% of organizations sit here. And then the remaining 5% is dynamic enablement. So this is where L&D teams focus on driving workforce and business performance as an AI first L&D team. And I'll talk about what that means in a minute. But one thing that I want to call out is that we compared the business, people, innovation, and productivity outcomes of all of the levels. But when we look at level 3 to level four L&D teams at this dynamic enablement level far perform even the best of traditional L&D teams. But one thing I want to call out is that they are 2 times more likely to innovate effectively, which is what creates the competitive advantage when we talk about this world of dynamic work design. And so, is there some value in optimizing legacy L&D? For now, yes, but small organizations, large organizations across industries that have reached dynamic enablement consistently can innovate more can effectively, and that's their competitive advantage. And to get there, there's several things that they do. I've spoken with AI first L&D teams as well as teams that are well on their way to becoming AI first across the globe. And every single organization that I spoke to started their transformation by acknowledging that paradigm shift from owning learning to enabling learning. And once they make that flip, then I can't say everything becomes easier, but everything else becomes clearer because all of the elements of corporate learning become viewed through that enablement mindset. So the learning strategy then centers on leveraging AI to dissolve boundaries between work, learning, and enterprise knowledge so you can balance just-in-time learning with meaningful career growth that is illuminated through democratized work skill and talent intelligence that paves out like skill and development pathways. But we also need to talk about the technology transformation, of course. So the biggest shift is moving away from locking learners into a rigid LXP or LMS or learning portal interface and move them towards an AI native platform experience where AI
Yeah.
is the primary learner interface. And these AI native platforms are not just about the learner experience, they also support and streamline content creation, content ownership over time, and learning administration. So, the goal with an AI native platform is to support that strategy of dissolving the boundaries between work, learning, and knowledge to deliver relevant content, personalized content anywhere employees need it through voice, chat, video, tutors, coaches,
Yeah.
whatever the modality might be.
Yeah, and I can imagine, for various individuals that could look quite different, right? So
Mhm.
I love that you're not focusing on locking people in to like a particular kind of platform or a particular type of learning modality. So, some one employee might really learn better from like a coaching, like say you have like an AI coaching bot, right?
Yeah,
Or another person might have like some short just-in-time videos that are created. Another person might just have some like a short kind of infographic that can just kind of show out the steps, right? Like a work aid. Or like there's all these different ways that you can have resources provided, training resources provided for individuals that can help them with any given gap that might exist or to develop whatever skills might be lacking. Yeah, I mean, I think that's tremendous, and it's the biggest issue that most organizations are facing in the L&D space.
you're right.
The gap or the inability to really truly assess the gap in skills and the inability to provide the training in a real clear targeted way, especially at scale to individuals who need it in a just-in-time way, right? That's been
Exactly.
the golden goose, like that has been unattainable for so long, and now it really does seem at least potentially in reach.
Exactly. And I talked about the strategy and I talked about the tech, but I haven't yet talked about the operating model changes. And that's where the scale piece that you mentioned comes in. So, at a high level, we see that the operating model changes because L&D moves away from being a cost center focused on service delivery
Yeah.
towards being a consulting function that rapidly builds prototypes and solutions to address urgent business needs. And so they focus on the performance challenge as opposed to the perceived surface level content problem that the business thinks that it
Mm.
has.
Yeah.
And so we see actually, and I get a lot of questions when I bring this up with L&D leaders, but over time they buy into it. Most AI first L&D teams that I have come in contact with have democratized content creation and some even content ownership completely to subject matter experts across the business. And that's where they get the scale of highly relevant learning across the learning portfolio. But what that does is that the lean L&D team at the center can then serve as trusted business advisors
Hmm.
who help diagnose operational challenges, design skilling solutions, and ultimately drive performance. And oftentimes, this means collaborating across HR to make holistic talent recommendations, which isn't always a learning intervention, even if the business thinks that it is. Often learning is involved, but
Yeah.
L&D professionals and AI first L&D teams will speak up when learning is not the optimal
Yeah.
solution or not the whole solution. And so AI is really creating increased capacity to redesign L&D roles at the center to be much more strategic.
I love that. I love that. The L&D team really becomes consultants to the rest of the organization, and empowers them, right, to own their own learning and development, right? And
Exactly.
also can help teach them how to recognize when learning and development is the answer and when it's not the answer. And oftentimes it's systems, oftentimes it's processes, oftentimes it's yeah, like that's the trap I think HR has fallen into so often in the past is like, especially for L&D professionals, it's like, yeah, we love training and development. We love learning. We want to throw training at any problem, right? And
Right.
then we start to get a bad rap for that because training doesn't solve everything. And anyone who's honest with themselves knows that that's the case. And we can own that and become much more strategic and actually help everyone throughout the organization really recognize the appropriateness of various learning and development tools and yeah, and just approach it from a much more of a consulting strategic place will become much more valuable in the organization and help leaders throughout the organization address the real needs. Sometimes it's learning, sometimes it is systems, processes, policies, practices, procedures that need to be adapted and adjusted, right? And sometimes it's both or multiple, multi-prong approach to solving the problems that organizations will face. And it's an exciting time, I think, for us to live in, from an organizational perspective, as we can just be more holistic in how we approach the challenges that we face.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And just to summarize, in essence, what dynamic enablement L&D teams are actually doing differently in a way that's a bit more tangible is it really comes down to three distinct pillars. The first one is building that skill priority analysis muscle that we talked about at the start. The second one is making sure you have a dynamic, diverse learning experience portfolio that can cater to the immediate learning needs in the moment of work, as well as the broader growth goals of individuals in the company. And that includes formal and informal learning experience. And then the third pillar of a dynamic skilling ecosystem is the AI native platform that not only provides the architecture and scale for everything that we've been talking about, but also creates more seamless integration across the broader HR, talent, and business tech stacks.
I love it. I love it. Jordan, this has just been a fascinating conversation. I know there's so much more in this report, so much more we could dive into and dig into. But I also know at the time I need to probably let you get on with your busy day. But before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, how they can connect with your team there at the Josh Bersin Company, where they can find the report, and then give us the final word for today.
Absolutely. Yes. So you can find out more about the research on the Josh Bersin Company website. You can also contact me on LinkedIn. I view this podcast as the start of a conversation, and I would love to have a conversation with your listeners as well, John. So you're more than welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to hear some examples of what companies are doing to become an AI first L&D team, or if you want to learn more about anything that we discussed today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, it's been a pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Jordan and her team can do for you. Check out the report. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. They can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
Thank
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.